God is stricken. Then see his foes lie crushed beneath his feet, for the conqueror has risen. So Spirit, come, strengthen every stride, give grace for every hurdle, that we may run with faith to win the prize of a servant good and faithful, as saints of old still line the way, retelling triumphs of his praise. We hear their calls and hunger for the day when with Christ we stand, Lord. When with Christ we stand. When with Christ we stand. When with Christ we stand in glory.
I believe we have one more song. Let me look. Oh, no, we don't. We have Charity. You're special. Yeah.
Go, Cherry.
Oh, yeah, there he is. We're having some technical difficulties. It starts with a desire, let it be Okay, I have 2 gifts left. And so I don't know if you noticed or not, but the theme is, the flamingo. When I was looking at the ladies' luncheon, because we did the ladies' retreat and it was so big and has so much work that goes into it, usually the ladies' luncheon that the same year isn't as elaborate. But when I was looking for the theme and all of that, the flamingo just kind of kept jumping out at me. And so I started thinking about the flamingo and started researching the flamingo. So to give away the next 2 gifts, I'm going to ask you a question. The first one with the correct answer gets the gift, okay? So how many species of flamingos are there? Did I tell you? Okay, 1. Nope. 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 No. 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 No.
11.
Nope. No. Nope. Lower.
5.
Nope. Nope.
3.
Nope.
2.
Nope.
1.
No. It's higher than 5 and lower than 11. 6. Yes, Debbie got it. Or she was the first one I heard say it. But you already got it. So pick somebody to get the gift.
7. I don't know.
Who else said 6? I only heard Debbie. Did anybody else say 6? Andre, got it. There are 6 species. Most of them are found in South America. They have been found in Russia, but mostly they're warm birds. But they're also found in the mountains of Argentina, believe it or not. So I researched the flamingo a lot. Okay, you have to raise your hand for this because I can't hear everybody yelling. Who knows what a group of flamingos are called? Sarah? Yes. Yes. Which I thought was quite humorous. Oh, that is true. It was on the slide at church.
It was.
Yes. We know who reads the slides. And makes the slides, yes. So I asked Keith to kind of make me this little collage of pictures. All of these pictures up here are different aspects of the flamingo that I'm going to cover in the lesson. So it just kind of gives you a visual, because I'm very visual and I have to see things. So like I said, I researched the flamingo a lot. And you would think that there's a lot more said about the flamingo, but there's really not. It wasn't really a quick study, but they're interesting birds. They're very pretty, I think. So let me just kind of read off to you a little bit of the facts that I found about flamingos. There's 6 breeds or 6 species of flamingos. The group is called the flamboyants. The name flamingo, I thought this was kind of interesting. Is Kiska here? You'll find this interesting. The name flamingo comes from a Portuguese word that means flame colored. I can't pronounce the Portuguese word, and I wasn't about to try, so you'll just have to look it up. But I just thought that was interesting. Kiska and Joshua are going to be missionaries to Portugal, so I thought that was kind of cool. Flamingos can be found both in warm and cold climates, but mostly the warm climates. Their bills, so I don't know if you can look at their bills are kind of crooked, but they're specifically made to filter out mud and silt from the food that they eat, and they use them upside down, kind of like the scoop on like a backhoe or whatever. They kind of use them like that. Kind of interesting to watch if you watch any videos of them. They balance on one leg mostly. This one was actually kind of the more controversial thing about and I say controversial. It took a little while to finally find an agreement on why they do this. But they mostly balance on one leg, and this is because they're more stable on one leg, which doesn't make sense to us because we have 2 legs and we're more stable on 2 legs. But when they stand on both, they tend to sway more, because when they stand on one leg, that joint, which is actually, we would call it its knee, but it's actually its ankle, locks into place. It doesn't do that when he stands on 2 legs. But whenever they stand on one leg, it naturally locks into place and it keeps them from swaying. They also say that It helps them conserve energy, and it helps them to stay warm longer because they're conserving energy. They're very vocal birds. They're very, very, very loud, very noisy. They kind of remind me of the peacock, only not as shrill. They have kind of a deeper sound. They're also very social birds. They do not do well on their own. And in the wild, like the picture up there in the top corner, they're usually found in groups of like 20, 50. They've even had hundreds and thousands of groups documented. But when you see them in the zoo, they usually have them a minimum of 15, because they found if they do less than that, they don't survive. They don't thrive at all. They are very much social birds. So with that, all of those, little interesting tidbits in our minds now, we're going to look at a few verses. So if you want to turn to Ecclesiastes 7:16. Is that funny, Macy? When I thought of the flamingo, instantly I thought about these verses. Ecclesiastes 7:16 says, hold on, just one second. It's in my Bible. Yes. 7:16, it says, "Be not righteous overmuch, neither make thyself overwise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself?" And verse 17 says, "Be not overmuch wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time?" And then verse 18 kind of finishes it all together, and it says, "It is good that thou shouldest take hold of this. Yea, also from this withdraw not thine hand, for he that fears God shall come from them all." And so you might be sitting there saying, okay, so what does the flamingo have to do with these verses? But I think we can learn a few things from them that helps with balance. And really, that's what I think that these two verses really convey, is a balanced life. When you first read them, at least the first time I stumbled across these verses, I was a little bit confused, thinking, what in the world? He tells us to not be over righteous. Are we supposed to be righteous? Then the Bible tells us to do that. And then he tells us not to be over much wicked. So does that mean, are we supposed to have any wickedness? So just kind of those first pondering thoughts. But I don't think it means those things at all. So I want to kind of use the flamingo to illustrate what I feel like the meaning of these verses are. I didn't share this a while ago, but another interesting fact about the flamingo is their color comes from the food that they eat. The more blue algae and the more shrimps, they eat those little tiny shrimp thingy-majigs. I don't know what they're called. They're just little shrimps. The brighter their color. And so when you notice a flamingo that is more dull in their color, that means they're not getting enough of their diet that they normally eat, their steady nutrients. Well, the same is true with us. The healthier our spiritual diet is, the more evident it will be to those around us. We look at the flamingo and we think, oh, that's a pretty color. But now that we know why they're that color, we can look at them and analyze, oh, that's a healthy bird, that's an unhealthy bird. Same way for us. When we have a healthy spiritual diet, people can look at us and go, that's a healthy Christian, that's an unhealthy Christian. Galatians 5:22 says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law." When we're in His Word daily and actively putting on Christ and putting on the fruit of the Spirit, when we're putting on Christ, the fruit of the Spirit will naturally show up on the outside towards others. It'll show up in our attitudes, it'll show up in our spirit, it'll show up in our words. All of those things are evidences of our spiritual diet. Another fascinating aspect to the flamingo is its beak, and we kind of pointed it out a while ago. They're not the prettiest beak. I've seen, those little songbirds that come around the house. Their beaks sometimes are real bright, vibrant colors and very pretty. The flamingo's beak isn't really pretty, but it's very, very necessary, and it's very efficient. They use them to filter out the mud and the silt, like we mentioned a while ago. And we also need to have a balanced diet, and we also need to filter out what we're partaking of as well. The things that we read, the things we listen to, the things we watch, the people we allow to influence us is all part of that daily diet. that's what must be balanced in what we, so that's why we must be balanced in what we read, listen to, watch, and who we receive instruction from. We can be overmuch righteous, and I've seen this, I say overmuch righteous. I don't mean it the way it sounds. So what I mean when I say that is, I've seen some people where all they do is they just consume themselves with everything they can find on the internet about the Bible, about religion, about all these different things. And they're consuming all of this stuff, and they're overmuch. But not all of it is healthy. They're not using that filter that God has given us. And they can appear to others to be righteous because they have this vast amount of knowledge, but all that knowledge might not be about the right things. So we have to be balanced in what we read and what we study. And even what preaching you listen to. The first time you hear somebody, it may sound good, but then the further you get into it, it may not be good. So you have to be careful what you listen to and who you listen to. Solomon warns us here that you must be careful and balanced in righteousness. It has to be filtered before you partake of it. Pastors provided a good way for us to filter our music through Haven Radio. We have a library, Miss Karen manages, and some of the other lady manages, with good books, so we can filter our reading through our church's library. Pastor brings other preachers in and other missionaries in of like faith for us to learn from, so we have filtered preaching that way as well. And then our pastor is a good resource to use as a filter. So if we have questions about things, or when we're studying things, or when we hear things, we can go to our pastor and he can filter those things, help us filter those things through the Word of God and determine whether or not those are things we need to be partaking of. I know he welcomes any kind of questions like that, because his desire is for us to grow and to be healthy. On the flip side, which is the very next verse that we read a while ago about being over much wicked, we see this steady diet of wickedness and carnality and works of the flesh also shows up on the outside to those around us. Galatians 5:19 says, "Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God." And I don't know if you noticed when I was reading those lists, the wicked list is a lot more long than the righteous list, because it's so much easier to fall into those bad habits. Solomon tells us that these things are foolishness, and if we partake in these things, that our life could be cut off short needlessly. Go back to that verse there in Ecclesiastes 7:17. "Be not overmuch wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time? To partake in wickedness is foolishness, and it cuts your life short." And who better to illustrate that than Solomon himself? The things we do, the things we say, the places we go, and the people we hang out with, and the attitudes that we portray all reveal what you're feeding on. They all reveal the flesh and the carnal things, not the things of the Spirit. We need to be careful with these things because they don't just affect us. They affect everyone around us as well as our church. This last week, I was thinking about this statement. I think I even posted it one day in my devotions, but the unintended and the unintentional still suffers consequences. And what I was just really thinking about that was, even though we may not intend to hurt somebody, or our intention wasn't to, have negative consequences, there's still consequences for our actions. There's still consequences for the things that we do. And even though we don't intend to hurt anybody else, even though we don't maybe even intend to hurt ourselves, there's still those consequences. That's why the filter is so, so important. And Pastor preaches on that all the time about the gospel filter, filtering your life through the gospel. The Bible is very clear on who we need to be around, on what we need to listen to, what we need to read, and what we need to watch. And we need to take an honest look at that. I keep bringing this up, what we listen to, what we read, what we watch, because we're such a social people nowadays. We have everything right here 24/7, and we're listening to things, we're reading things, we're watching things, we're hearing things all the time. And those things, we shouldn't be so naive to think that those things do not influence us and that they don't affect us, because they do. And so we have to be so very careful about that. But it's clear on who we need to be around, it's who we need to listen to, what we need to talk about, what we need to watch, and what we need to participate in. And the struggle that I have found over probably this last year is people don't really want to take an honest look at those things. They don't want to look at what they're reading because they like it, or that's their preference, or that's their conviction. But all of those things are good and fine, fancy terms, but what's God's conviction about those things? What is His preference about those things? What does He want us to do? That's really what our question should be. That's really what we should be asking, not what's my preference, or what's my conviction, or what things do I like, but what does God want for me? I mentioned earlier that the flamingo stands on one leg. Well, it's really kind of weird how they discovered this, but because they dissect them and all of those things, and they see the tendons and all of those, the joints and all of that, but they didn't really understand how they worked until one day they just did this kind of off-the-wall experiment where they had, at a zoo, a couple of the flamingos had passed away, so they were like, we just want to know why they do this. So they didn't know if there was something to standing on one leg making them more balanced, or standing on two legs makes them more balanced. So they took the two birds. The one, they stood up on both legs to try to see if it would lock in place and they would stand, but it wouldn't. But when they took the other bird and they stood on one leg, that joint naturally locked in place, and it was stable. It wouldn't move. And so, kind of a morbid way to figure it out. But that's how they learned that when they stand on one leg, it locks into place. And that is how they're able to do that for long periods of time. But it doesn't, when they do that, it keeps them from swaying. They eat things that are in water. So sometimes they're on the coast and those waves come in. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the ocean before, but sometimes the waves are nice and soft. Sometimes they're not, and so they come crashing in. Well, if you're standing in the water trying to eat, those waves hit you and sway you. So they need something to help them to stand straight and without moving. And so standing on one leg does that. Just like waves come sometimes and it tries to knock the flamingos down, we have waves that come in our life too, right? Sometimes there's small waves, just little, we call them like hiccups or bumps in the road or whatever that come into life. We can handle those pretty well. On two legs, not that big of a deal. And then sometimes there's bigger waves that feel like they're just going to overtake us and crash us and knock us down. But God has provided a way for us to stand through those times just like He did the flamingo. And that is our church. That is being plugged in. That is the Lord. If you want to look in Psalms, we're going to be in Psalms the next several verses. Psalm 16:8. And if I get to talking too fast, just tell me. I tend to do that when I am a little bit nervous. I don't know why I'm nervous, but Psalm 16:8 says, I have set the Lord always before me, because He is my right hand, I shall not be moved. So the Lord helps us not be moved. Psalms 21:7 says, for the king trusteth in the Lord, and through the mercy of the Most High he shall not be moved. So He even provides a way for those that are in authority to not be moved. Psalm 62 and verse 2. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved. That's for when those great waves start coming. God can be our rock. He will help us not be moved. Psalm 62:6. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. And then over in the New Testament, there in Acts chapter 2, and verse 25, for David speaketh concerning him, I foresaw the Lord always before my face, for he is on my right hand, that I should not be moved. And then in Colossians 1:23, there were so many verses, I only picked out a few, so that talked about the Lord helping us not be moved or standing strong. Okay, I know Colossians, there it is. 1:23. If ye continue in the faith, grounded and settled, be not moved away from the hope of the gospel which ye have heard, and which was preached to every creature which is under heaven, whereof I, Paul, am made a minister. So these are just a small sampling of verses that we can go to get encouragement to not be moved when the waves of life try to overtake us. Because the waves are going to come and they're going to go, but when they do, we have to be balanced in our life to be able to withstand them. In James 1:2, well, actually, it's James 1 through 8, I believe. Let me get over there. James verse 2 all the way through 8. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptation, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. James paints an amazing picture of what it's like to live your life according to the waves of life. You're up one day and down the next day, and up and down and up and down, and you're tossed back and forth, and you're not stable. A ship who is tossed back and forth in waves like that, they're not anchored to anything. So James paints us a picture of a person who's lost their anchor. They're not locked into place. They're subject to their feelings. They're subject to their circumstances. So we need to take a hint from the flamingo, and we need to get locked in. I mentioned a while ago that the church is a perfect place to be locked in at. Another interesting fact about the flamingo is that the whole group sometimes will just stand on one leg. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that they would all do it together. And it provided more strength for the entire body when they did that. And it reminded me of our church. When everybody in our church is plugged in, when we're all going the same direction and we're all seeking the Lord, nothing can move our church. Nothing can shake our church's foundation. But if we waver, if we're like this person that James tells us, then we're going to be shook up. Then the congregation is going to be shook up. People are going to fall away. So we have to be balanced. We have to be united. That was one of the things that I really liked reading about with the flamingos. And if you ever watch videos of them, like they do this thing too, which is kind of humorous. When they move together as a group, they'll stretch their necks all the way out, and they'll turn their beaks like this, and they all move together in one motion. And it's so funny to watch, but it's neat. But it's that unity that is in that group. It's really something fascinating to watch. I was said to watch. Pastor probably thought I was crazy because he was studying while we were down in Texas, and I was watching videos of flamingos. And he's being spiritual, and I'm watching birds, you know. So it was kind of humorous. But we are to do that to one another in the church, right? We are there to help break the waves that's coming in other people's lives. We're there to bear one another's burdens. We're there to edify, to uplift, to encourage. And if we don't get that here, where are we going to get it from? Because the world doesn't have those things for us. They don't care whether or not we make it. They don't care what's happening in our life. But this is where that strength comes from. I know for myself that when I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm just feeling down, that when I come here, it's a place I know that I'm going to receive encouragement. It's a place I know that I'm going to receive strength. It's a place I know that I'm going to feel that love that God has in our church family. A second kind of notion that I mentioned this earlier, that they kind of felt like that the purpose of standing on one leg was to conserve energy and to maintain heat. Because sometimes, like I said, they're found in cold places and warm places. Sometimes they're standing in really frigid water, and to eat enough food for that day or to sustain them, they have to stand there for longer periods of time. So being able to conserve energy and conserve heat helps them a lot to be able to stand there and eat more. Many of you work outside jobs. Many of you have to deal with people out in the world, and it's cold, and it's dark, and it's mean, and it's not a fun place to be. So when you are out there, you need to have that sustenance that you've been feeding on here on Wednesday and Sunday morning, Sunday night, special activities and those things that you're feeding on here, so that you can conserve your energy, that you can conserve the warmth and the love of the Lord, so that when you are out there at your daily jobs, your daily tasks, and you're dealing with the cold world, that you can conserve some of that heat and that love. So there's a purpose in the church family. It's not just so that we can meet together and have a good time and fellowship and laugh, but it is to sustain us throughout the week, just as the Flamingos has to conserve its energy. Another fascinating aspect that we've discussed a couple of times now is the beak. It's very, very, very efficient for them, and it balances out and filters out what they're eating spiritually. And I mentioned this a while ago, but social media and our phones and news stations, and I don't watch any news. Number one, you never know if you're getting the whole truth. More than likely you're not. And I don't have it on my social media. I don't look at the news. I figure the Lord will tell me what I need to do when I need to do it, and that's all that matters. But I also filter my social media. I don't get into the political talks. I don't get into all that garbage, because it's not edifying. It doesn't edify my spirit. It doesn't help me maintain that warmth that we've been talking about. It just makes me irritated. It brings out all of those works of the flesh that we read a while ago. It doesn't bring out any fruit of the Spirit. So I have to guard my social media. I'm very picky about it, and who I follow and what I allow, and all of those different things. Friends, I'm very picky about friends as well, to make sure, and it's not because I want to come off that I'm better than anybody else. It's because I have a spiritual walk that I have to maintain before the Lord. I'm accountable to Him, and so I want to do everything possible to protect that walk and that life that God has given me. And we have to do that. We have to seek God every single day. What do you want from me? Who do you want me to be around? Brother Lewis, we were just with Brother Lewis, and when we were here before in class, he would teach, you need to take you have your daily planner. This was before, this. You have your daily planner, and you pull it out, and you have everything written down, times, what you want to do, and all of those things. And you've got your day all scheduled. But did you ask the Lord what He wanted you to do? No. Well, because I have this and this and this. I have all of those things. But I didn't ask the Lord, okay, what do you want me to do today? Is there somebody you want me to minister to? Is there a phone call you want me to make? Is there a visit you want me to make? Is there a particular store you want me to go to? I know this store has good bargains, but maybe the Lord wants me to go over here because there's a person in that aisle that I'm supposed to talk to. All of those things are important. We take them for granted and we don't think about them. We just kind of gloss over them. But all of those things are part of God's daily plan for us. And if we're not going to Him daily, before our day starts, how are we going to know what He wants for us to do? How are we going to know what He wants for us to feed on? So that's just another aspect of the beak that I was thinking about, that we needed to use as filters. And then I mentioned this a while ago that flamingos are social, and they are very loud. If you look up videos, they're not shrill like the peacock. I don't know if you've ever heard the peacock, but it's just like ear piercing. They're more a lower tone, but they almost kind of sound like a goose, but I think better than a goose. Geese are annoying. Anyway, but they're very loud, and they're, like I said, they get in a big group and they raise their heads and they honk and twist their heads. vocal. They're just out there. That's who they are. And so we need to be like that. We need to be vocal with our faith. We need to be sharing the Lord with others around us. When they look at us, do they see the attributes of fruit of the Spirit? Number one. Number two, do they hear you talk about those things? It's one thing to see or hear but not see, or see and not hear. All of those things work together. We need to be sharing our faith with others. Are you being a witness? Are you out on visitation? We've provided different times to go out. I know like on Wednesdays, I think there's several ladies that go out. On Thursday night or Tuesday nights, there's a couple of ladies that go out. There's a place for us to go. When you're at the grocery store, do you talk to people? I have a gift. I have this gift. I attract them. But they always come up to me and ask me, ha ha ha. She's laughing at me. They always come up and ask, hey, do you know where to find this? And I'm thinking, am I wearing the store's colors? You know, what's the deal? But people always ask me questions. Do I take that opportunity and share with them? Do I show kindness? Do I show love? Do I show those things to me? Because God presents those opportunities to us, but do we take advantage of those things? We need to be bold, like the in our speaking, like the flamingo. We don't need to give in to our fears, because the Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and a sound mind. So we get to choose who has control over us: our fears, which we know come from Satan, or love, which comes from the Lord. And then lastly, I mentioned this a couple of times throughout the lesson, was that we need fellowship. We don't thrive when we're alone. Over the last, probably since maybe February or January, the pastor's been doing this study on aloneness, and it seems like, I don't know if you guys are like this, but when you're studying something, you tend to see it more everywhere. It's like when you get a new car, you get your car and you think, no one's had a car like this, and all of a sudden you get it and you start driving it and you're like, oh, there's one. You just notice it more. So that's kind of the way it's been for Pastor and I with the aloneness. But the flamingo doesn't do well alone, and we don't do well alone. And then, of course, like I said, I watch tons of nature videos. But guess who gets picked off in the group, or in the herd? Those that are straggling behind, that are off all alone, or those that are hurting that aren't part of the group, right? That's who Satan picks off. That's who the lion picks off. That's who the predators pick off with the flamingos if they're not in that large group. Then they get picked off. The same is true in our churches. If we see someone that is not getting involved, not being active, being a part of our church, we need to go to them and we need to encourage them and edify them and try to get them back involved in the body, because if we don't, there's a lion out there that he's just waiting for that 1 weak moment to pick them off and destroy their life. And so we have to be on lookout for that. That's one of the things that I read about the flamingo is when they mate for life, by the way, I didn't mention that earlier. They mate for life, but then also they build their nest all in one large group, and the whole flock, the whole flamboyance, keeps watch over those birds, those baby chicks. They look out for them, they help protect them because there's strength in numbers, right? And so we need to be that way too. We need to be on watch for each other. Protecting each other, that we not lose anybody to that lion who's out there waiting to pick them off. And we can't do that if we're not including everybody, if we're not involving everybody, and we have to do that. So just a few things that I learned from the flamingo in relationship to this verse. And I was thinking about Solomon, who wrote it, which, let's see. When he started off like strong, right? The Lord came to him and said, ask me anything. And we all are like amazed. Solomon asked for wisdom. And even God said, he didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for position. Sorry, the grandbaby's tired. She went to Texas and got back late. But he didn't ask for those things. He asked for wisdom. And even the Lord's like, that's a good thing to ask for. But even in all of his wisdom, how do we see him end up at the end? Right? He's got all of these multiple wives. He's got all of these idols that he is allowing, groves being built and all of these things. But he was the wisest person in the world. Like, wouldn't he have known that this would be the outcome? No. You know why? Because verse 17, I think it was, where he says, let me get back over there. If I can find it. Or 16, because he was righteous over much. He thought, you know, I know how to make good decisions. I'm a pretty good person. I know what the Bible says. I can sort things out. I can play with this for a little while, and then when it comes down to it, I know the right decisions to make, and I'll make it in time. But that's not how it works. Even the unintended and the unintentional still suffers consequences. He thought he was righteous enough and holy enough and smart enough that he'd always be able to make wise decisions until one day he didn't. And we don't know when that day is. So we see him at the end of his life being over much wicked. We see his life cut short. Can you think about if he would have kept himself for the Lord, how much longer maybe the Lord would have allowed him to live, how much more he could have led the children of Israel into in serving God. But his life was cut short because he was over much wicked. And he tells us that at the end of his life, when he's reflecting back on everything he's done, he's giving us a warning. Don't be over much righteous, and don't be over much wicked. Both are destructive. Both will hinder your walk with the Lord. And so I think he's telling us, live a balanced life. Don't be too far this way, don't be too far this way, but just be balanced. Just seek the Lord. Follow him every single day. You know how to stay balanced? Take no thought for tomorrow. Ask the Lord today. If I'm doing what God wants me to do today, I'm going to be in balance. And then tomorrow when I wake up, if I ask him what he wants me to do today, I'm going to be in balance. If I get over balance when I start thinking about the future, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, and then I start leaning maybe this way, or if I start considering my past, what happened in the past, then I'm going to be over-focused this way. I just need to be focused on God. I just need to know what he wants for me every single day. And we can't do that unless we're in here. And we don't want to be picked off. So we need to be here. And we need to be edifying and strengthening each other. So that is a life from a flamingo. So next time you see a flamingo, think about the different aspects of that flamingo. Because I know every time I see one now, that's what I think about. Everything I read is just like, okay, how does that apply to me? And so, anyway, the flamingo is a special bird, I think. And pretty. And I like where it lives. The ocean. So, we're going to go ahead and pray. Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry?
We need about 10 more minutes. Can you go ahead and do your last game and song?
We don't have a last game, but we can sing a song. Oh, a song. Yeah, we have a song. I'm like, you told me we didn't have a game. Yeah, we'll do a song. And then we'll fellowship for about till...
If everyone wants to go ahead and get their drinks,
Okay.
and even their dessert, that would be fine. And
Okay.
then as soon as we're
Okay. So we'll go ahead and we'll sing our last song, and the men are going to service. So after we sing the song, we'll start at the back table back there, and we'll dismiss a row at a time. Go get your drink, go get your dessert. If you're gluten-free, there are no gluten-free desserts, I'm sorry. But all the food is gluten-free. So we'll sing our last song, and then we'll dismiss by row. As you see that row get back, then you get the next row to go. Roll.
Okay, turn to page 377. We'll sing all 4 verses. We're going to change that and do 185. We're still missing all 4 verses.